everything went wrong. Where you thought you were a washed up has-been. You thought there is no way that God could ever use this broken vessel. Know that God said to Jeremiah, can I not do this with you? I can reform you. I can either start all over, or I can use you with all your cracks and your holes just the way you are for this time. And as long as we're still on this earth with breath in our lungs, He has not put the final coat on us yet. He can still tear us down and start over. He can still make us new for what He wants us to do.
We are the clay. You are the potter. We are all works in your hands. You have a plan for our lives. A purpose. A future. You promise you won't leave us. And when we face the tests and trials, you are there. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future.
Well, our scripture today, we're going to look at two of them. Who here paid any attention to the theme? Was it glaring enough? We're talking about the potter and the clay. So we're actually going to look from Jeremiah, starting out with 18. Now, Jeremiah was a prophet. He was not a bullfrog, for those of you who grew up in the 60s and 70s. He was a very major prophet that God used. And He takes Jeremiah to a place to teach him a lesson. How many here learn things better when you see it or you do it? So hear the words from Jeremiah. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Go down to the potter's house, and there I will give you my message. So I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working at the wheel. But the pot he was shaping from, the clay, was marred in his hands. So the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as it seemed best to him. Then the word of the Lord came to me, and He said, can I not do this with you, Israel, as this potter does, declares the Lord? Like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand, Israel. If at any time I announce that a nation or kingdom is to be uprooted, torn down, or destroyed, and if that nation is warned, repents of its evil, then I will relent and not inflict on it the disaster I had planned. And if at another time I announce that a nation or a kingdom is to be built up and planted, and if it does evil in my sight and does not obey me, then I will reconsider the good that I had intended to do for it. I wish you guys could have seen your faces when I said, everyone's going to get Play-Doh. And I love it. So, okay, I want to know, out of here, who has not, okay, I know I had you open it up to see if it was hard, but who has not taken your Play-Doh out of your box yet? Everybody's taking it out. Everyone. That's interesting because when I have done this before, you wouldn't believe how many people wouldn't take it out of the container. And when I asked them why, I already knew the answer. They didn't want to mess it up. But I'm glad to know that we don't have anybody here like that. Everybody's already taken it out and been messing with it. Well, we're talking about the potter and the clay. So, is there anyone here that grew up as a kid that never had Play-Doh? How many moms actually make Play-Doh for your kids? I was almost to that point. I thought I was going to have to because I didn't think I could find enough. Now I feel really bad that they didn't get to play with it at the last service. So Jeremiah was put into an interesting position. He had a message to give. It wasn't actually a very weighty message. But God didn't just tell him the words. He showed it to him. He took him to a potter, and that was his job. Now, if you remember in history, more so than kind of what we have today, if somebody was in the profession of something, that was kind of their whole family lineage. So if you were a blacksmith, the whole family were blacksmiths. If you were a stonemason, the whole family were stonemasons. If you were a potter, guess what your family were? They were potters. It just kept working down the way. So God sends Jeremiah to the potter's house to show him this lesson. Now, did you pick up on what the lesson was right at the beginning? Jeremiah walks in and he sees all these works of art all sprinkled throughout the potter's house. And he's working on one particular pot or cup or vase. In Hebrew, it was kind of a little bit about the same. But did he see this perfect pot? What was wrong with it? As he was spinning it, it started to what? It started to crack. And it said it was marred. And it was falling apart. And then it said, but Potter didn't leave it that way, did he? He didn't just go, I'm done with the day. He said, no, he took that clay and he molded it and he put it back in the box. He grabbed more clay and he put it back on the wheel and he started over. And he fashioned it, not into the pot he was originally doing, but into a new one. It said that fit his choosing. Then he says, this is Israel. You can do this with a pot. Since I am the potter, I can do this with you. You know your history. You know where you've been. You know what you've gone through and where you've come out of. But now I am going to make you new. See, when Jeremiah was doing this was during that whole exportation I keep talking about all the time. This was not during a good time in their lives. This was in a time when they were being exported, deported, whatever, moved to Babylon. Israel looked like it was done and in ruins. And yet God said, see how he's fashioning a new pot? That is what I am going to do with Israel. But there was a stipulation. What was the stipulation? He said, if you follow me, right? He takes the words from Deuteronomy. If you follow me, I will bless those who follow me, and I will curse those who turn their back on me. Stay tried and true. So think about that with our lives. Have you ever thought about being this pot? Do you ever have a time in life when things are going really, really good, and all of a sudden, who here has ever worked with clay on wood? Did you do that in school? I got to. Oh yeah, it was really fun. So you can thank Pat Pickering for all of this. In fact, she just kind of fashioned this up for me. And she says, oh, you can mess it up. And I'm like, oh, but I can't. I didn't at the last one. She goes, no, it's my therapy. But you have to put it on a wheel. So you take this lump of clay, you plop it on the wheel, and you get some water. Can't have too much. Gotta have just the right amount. And you start working it, but it doesn't just sit there. It has to start spinning. You get the centrifugal force of the spinning, and that's how you mold. If you watch that video, that's how you mold the clay into the shape of what you want. It's a process. It doesn't just happen. I got to do that in school. I thought, this would be really cool. I'm going to make me a vase or something, a jar, I don't know. And I started going, and then all of a sudden it must have went to the side because then it went thump, 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 tipped over, and it was a mess. It was nasty. That's how I ended up with an ashtray for my craft, because I didn't have to use the wheel. I just smashed it, made 4 corners. But I still made something. I could have said, and been so mad and went off and pouted because what I had grandeur in my mind did not turn out that I could have quit. You know, God calls us to create. And I love this because, like I said, she showed what it starts out like, but it's still wet. And then when you dry it, it turns in. It is different, but it turns like that. And then you have to put fire to it. Now, for me, this is the hardest part. I could not be a potter because this would devastate me. She had just the picture she wanted, and when she put it into the fire, it exploded. She said the motto that they tell potters is to be patient and never expect a finished product until it's finished. See, this would be me. I would get exactly what I wanted, and I'd be so excited, probably putting it on Facebook. And then I'd put it into the test of the fire. Mine probably wouldn't even come out looking that good. And I'd be devastated. Who sitting here has a talent or a craft that you know right off the top of your head that that's what you do? We all have talents. For some, it's working with wood. It's taking that big block of wood and turning it into, my grandpa taught me how to carve. And so either you're carving something, or you're building benches or tables or chairs or something of a beautiful woodwork. Maybe for some, it's painting. Painting that woodwork or painting on a canvas. You don't just take a blank canvas, well, unless you make a lot of money, you don't just throw paint at it and call it done. You usually have something in mind, a picture that you want to form, that you want to put on the canvas, but it's a process. It doesn't just happen. Maybe some of you weld metal and you make tools or crafts. Jerry Hurlbut is not here today, but he started doing that. He started taking sticks of metal, and I just thought of it now, and I should have brought it. He makes beautiful things out of this metal. He welds them into crosses and hearts. He made a guitar for Brooks, and she played the guitar. He made a drum set out of a cross for Ashley. In fact, her guitar has the cross in the center. He's constantly making things with the metal. I know there are a lot of you here that sew. You don't just sit down and say, I want a quilt. There's preparation. You have to go and find the different pieces of material that you want. You have to decide the pattern that you want, which is probably going to influence the pieces of material you want. And then it's painstakingly putting it together. Maybe you sew clothes. And if you're like me, you spend more time ripping it out than sewing because it's not going together right. I know that many here, all of you, have probably experienced at one time or another what your talent is. For those of you who say that you have no talent and you're not creative, I would say that's not true. And how can I prove it? Because God is the master creator, and when He created each of us, He created man in what? His own image. He has imprinted that same creative spirit in each and every one of us. So if you're sitting there going, I don't have talent, it's because you haven't explored what that talent may be. You know, I was talking to Pat. She just started taking up pottery right at the point of retirement. She had talents before that, crafts before that. This is a new one. God is constantly creating something new in you. For some, it's music. And even if you have always had the talent of music, it's different music. Something that you've wanted to play, but you haven't mastered it until later. So let me just throw this by you. I don't know how many have even read the newsletter yet, but this was kind of my 2 cents. If you've ever had, raise your hand if you've ever given birth or helped create a child. How many here have ever bred an animal? How many here have ever planted a garden, or flowers, or grass, or crops? You have the creative spirit inside each and every one of you. God has put that in your DNA to create. It's because we are made in His own image. As I said, if you look at this piece that has broken, and it's cracked, and you may think it's useless. After it's been dried and fired, the pitch changes, it becomes brighter. And then after you put the paint on it, and you fire it again, then it becomes a masterpiece. I wanted a chalice cup, and Pat had made that for me last month. And she showed me this. This is her. And if I'd known she'd had this, I would have brought a candle. It's a candle votive. I'm pretty sure. I don't think you can carry much water in it. Now, one may look at this cracked pot and say, what good is that? It's useless. It's worthless. But if you were to put a light in it, will the light shine in something that's solid? Or will the light shine through the cracks and the holes? See, our lives are not the perfect masterpiece, the final piece, until we depart from this world. While we are still here, the potter is constantly working on, redesigning, putting us in the fire, bringing us out of the fire, to refine us, So if you had times in your life when everything went wrong, where you thought you were washed up as that, you thought there is no way that God could ever use this broken vessel, know that God said to Jeremiah, can I not do this with you? I can reform you. I can either start all over, or I can use you with all your cracks and your holes just the way you are for this time. And as long as we're still on this earth with breath in our lungs, He has not put the final coat on us yet. He can still tear us down and start over. He can still make us new for what He wants us to do. I'm going to be going and doing my aunt's memorial service this afternoon after this. And I thought about that very thing. You know, she was brought up the same way as the rest of the family. She knew Jesus. She had accepted Christ when she was younger. And then she kind of went astray, like the prodigal son. Went on her own and thought she knew how to do things better, differently. But just like that prodigal son, she too came home. And not just geographically before she passed, but spiritually as well. God let her know He was not done with her yet. And He had taken all that brokenness and all that messiness, and He continued to fashion, to turn her into something that when it went through the fire, it did not break. And as of right now, she's being given the final coat. So I challenge you today, as you go home with your little Play-Doh, and you think about your life, think about what you've done, what you haven't done, what you've created, what you've not created. I challenge each and every one of you to think about the talents you have and the talents you may find out you didn't know you had. And how God can use that, that creative spirit, to bless not only you, but those around you. And then one day, when you're finally at your last piece, He will put that final coat on you as well and say, well done, good and faithful servant.